It's always a good sign when the kirtan's roaring. Yeah. And walking by and transcendental vibrations are penetrating the coverings of the universe, calling out. Om Jnana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Bhagavad Gita Advent tomorrow, Gita Jayanti. Everyone's familiar with Bhagavad Gita, or some of our new folks here, maybe not. But Bhagavad Gita is sometimes called the Gita Upanishad. It's in a very condensed format, has the complete philosophy of the Vedas. The Vedas are the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, which encompass many, many fields of knowledge, but they especially direct the human society towards self-realization, God realization. So Bhagavad Gita is foundational. Sometimes it's called the ABCs, of our philosophy. And we have many literatures, but the founder of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, he often spoke from Bhagavad Gita, right? And especially in any public forums, he would often focus on the Gita, and I really resonate with the Gita because it's really it's pointing out sort of a situation that we all find ourselves in, situation of crisis. Arjuna, the recipient of the Bhagavad Gita, you could say the student of the Gita. Gita means song, and Bhagavad is referring to the absolute supreme person, Bhagavan, who possesses all opulences in full. And Arjuna is having a crisis. And I think we can all relate to the fact that this world is a confusing place. And so many, if you haven't gone through a crisis yet, there's no question that there will be a crisis. And sometimes the word is used, an existential crisis, where you're really questioning your existence, like who am I? And this is actually the beginning of human life. When we were talking about the Vedas contain many, many different branches of knowledge, but they're directing towards self-realization. And the Vedas describe, again, the Sanskrit writings of India, they describe that really human life, it really begins from the point of inquiry. Who am I? And why am I suffering? In this, we're like fish out of water. We have an innate sense of we want to enjoy, we want to be happy. And there's constant frustration because our happiness is being thwarted. Our enjoyment, our natural proclivity to enjoy, it's being, there's so many stumbling blocks to that natural. And our tendency to want to love and be loved, oftentimes it ends in heartbreak. That's probably the biggest crisis that we experience, is when we're in a relationship that seems to be what we've always been looking for. I remember one time I was in a relationship and I said, you're the person I've been looking for my whole life, And so that disappointment, that frustration, it actually opens up. It's sort of like a crack. It puts us in a receptive mode when we're in crisis and we're questioning, what's going on? And in the second chapter in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, he finally gave so many reasons why he couldn't perform his duty. And I was joking with a friend of mine, Alan. I said, if you were working in an office and somebody came in that day, a coworker, and they just sat in front of their computer and they just couldn't function. They couldn't turn on the computer. And then you're looking over and you say, like, what's going on? I can't do it. I just can't do this anymore. This is overwhelming. Like what's wrong? What's wrong? So Arjuna, he showed up for work and he was overwhelmed. He was a warrior, and he was confronted with a very a difficult task. It was a fratricidal war. It was relatives on the opposing army. And he just thought, how can I fight these people who they're actually my loved ones, my family members, grandfathers, cousins. So he was really overwhelmed. And it's actually described in the second chapter. It says he was depressed. His mind was depressed. So sometimes I think of the Bhagavad Gita as like sort of the original talk therapy, where, why do we go see a counselor or a therapist? Because we're having some crisis, like we can't figure our life out. We need some assistance to work through whatever issues that we're having. So let's see if I can find that. Where is that? I think it's the very first verse. Yeah. Seeing Arjuna full of compassion, his mind depressed, his eyes full of tears, Madhusudana, Krishna, spoke the following words. In the commentary, Prabhupada says, material compassion, lamentation, and tears are all signs of ignorance of the real self. Compassion for the eternal soul is self-realization. The word Madhusudana is significant in this verse. Lord Krishna killed the demon Madhu, and now Arjuna wanted Krishna to kill the demon of misunderstanding that had overtaken him in the discharge of his duty. No one knows where compassion should be applied. Compassion for the dress of a drowning man is senseless. Similarly, a man fallen in the ocean of nescience or ignorance cannot be saved simply by rescuing his outward dress, his material body. One who does not know this and laments for the outward dress is called a Shudra, or one who laments unnecessarily. So this was the very beginning. Let me see, I think it's actually, this is the first time that Krishna speaks. The whole first chapter is basically Arjuna telling Krishna why he can't do his duty. And he gave some very good arguments from one perspective. And so this crisis that Arjuna is having, ultimately he comes to a point where, like, I can't figure it out. I need help. And this is hard for us to do sometimes because we have this tendency, like, of independence, because we're part and parcel of the supremely independent Lord. And if you take a drop of water out of the ocean, Any quality that's in the ocean, or any quality that's in the drop, you'll find in the ocean. So Krishna, or God, is the supreme, independent, absolute personality of God. So we have a quality of independence, but it's very minute. But that can be it's very powerful. And that, just like many people, they don't want to work, they want to start their own business. I want to be an independent businessman, It's to have to be under some authority. It's not what so many people want. They want to be independent. But ultimately, nobody's independent. We need the sun. We need the rain. We need all the resources of the planet. Nobody is independent. So even if you don't accept that there's a supreme personality, a God, at least if we are honest, we say that I'm not independent. I am dependent on material nature. I can't provide everything I need from my own. I have to take the resources just to maintain this body. We are dependent. And now in our society, we're completely dependent. Like if you're not living on the land and growing your own food, we're completely dependent on the grocery stores, the trucks that deliver the produce, the gas. If there's a gas shortage, like how are we going to get our food? Like we're completely dependent. So Arjuna is he's giving up this sense of I can figure it out myself, and he submits to Krishna as a student. And this is really the beginning of spiritual life, is when we acknowledge that the material world is such a bewildering place. It's so confusing, and I'm in crisis, and I need help. And isn't it like in the 12-step programs? Isn't it like one of the steps is that I acknowledge that I was overcome. It's the first one. Yeah. So I'm powerless. This, whatever your addiction is, alcohol or drugs or sexual, whatever it is, you realize like that there's a power. It's overpowering me. I need help. So it's not just our tradition. This is fundamental in any field of knowledge. You don't just read books on your own. Like if you want to become a doctor, you don't just read medical books and then start operating on people. If you rolled in for brain surgery and the doctor comes out and he said, I read all the chapters on brain surgery. Let's give it a go. You want somebody who's got some experience, some practical experience. So this is why not in spiritual life? Why in every other field we need mentors, we need teachers, we need guides. So why, when it comes to spiritual life, do we think, no, I'll figure it out on my own? I'll just read different books. I'll adopt maybe some practices from this teaching and that teaching, and I'll mix it all up in a potpourri of my own version of spirituality. And I don't need anyone to show me or guide me. So this is this independent spirit that we do have, but it's a question of intelligence. Sometimes Krishna consciousness is called Buddhi Yoga, the yoga of an intelligence. And there are many, many, many verses in the Bhagavad Gita that talk about how you refine your intelligence and how you lose your intelligence. And also in the second chapter, Krishna says, Dhyayato vishayan pumsang sangasteshu padayate. Sangat sanjayate kama, kama krodha vijayate. So when you contemplate the objects of the senses, you become attached. And from that attachment, strong desire to enjoy those objects, kama. And from that kama, that strong desire, when it's frustrated, then one becomes angry. And when you're angry, you become a little deluded. Have you ever been angry? And I don't drive anymore because, well, I drove here because I got a friend's car that I'm borrowing. But I remember I would always, not always, but oftentimes when I was in a hurry and I was kind of stressed out, and I would, I'd have to, find my car keys, and I'd be looking around. Where are my keys? Where are my keys? I'd get all upset, and I'd be like holding them in my hand. I'd be like, where are my keys? Where are my keys? Or we have our bead bags, the beads sometimes. Where's my bead bag? Where's my bead bag? And it's hanging right around your neck, So anger, we basically become like dysfunctional. We become deluded, and from that deluded state, our memory becomes bewildered. And when your memory is bewildered, your intelligence is lost. Just like if you're driving and you pulled up to an intersection and you forget, there's a green light, a red light, which one do I go on? Like if your memory is bewildered, you can't function. You're dysfunctional. If your memory is bewildered, your intelligence is lost. So the conditioned soul, we, in forgetfulness of God, our memory is bewildered. We don't know who we are. So basically, we're dysfunctional. So don't feel bad if you're having a rough time in life. We're all a bit dysfunctional. Our intelligence is polluted or contaminated by material desires, and we're basically like DUI. We're under the influence of powerful modes of nature: goodness, passion, ignorance. These are three subtle energies that are basically conducting the material manifestation and influencing. So how do we purify our consciousness? How do we rise above this influence of these powerful forces of nature? That's the whole process of bhakti yoga. It's how to rise above ignorance, how to refine our intelligence, and not just intellectually accepting or understanding things, but actually the Bhagavad Gita, the analogy is given that the body is like a chariot, and a chariot with 5 horses. And then there's the reins and then the driver's holding the reins, and the 5 horses represent the 5 senses: our eyes, nose, our knowledge acquiring senses, the 5, what is it? Touch, smell, hearing, seeing, tasting. So that represents the 5 horses of the chariot. The mind is represented by the reins, and the intelligence is the driver. So if the intelligence is weak, then you're not holding the reins tight, and then the horses are going crazy, So when our spiritual intelligence is weak, then our senses are out of control, and we're basically just careening down out of, the horses are pulling in many, many different directions. Our eyes are pulling us this way, our ears are pulling us that way. There's a new restaurant. It's like, that's like the whole material world is just based, or like you see people like walk. I go for walks in the morning when I'm chanting my mantras, And you see people walking the dog, the dog is just, they have such a strong sense of smell, and they're just riveted, they got to stop and smell, everything, So when our senses are not controlled, when the mind is not controlled, when the intelligence is weak, we're really, we're really, we're really at a loss. So also in the second chapter, because the second chapter is called the contents of the Gita summarized. So there are many, many, many foundational verses. So in the 41st verse, yeah, it talks about the intelligence of a spiritual practitioner. Their intelligence, it's resolute, it's focused, it's fixed. And in yoga practice, there's a word samadhi. Samadhi, D sometimes, DHI sometimes refers to the intelligence. Samadhi, sama, means like fixed intelligence, fixed meditation. It can mean fixed mind also, but the subtle body composed of mind, intelligence, and ego, it's sort of all one. So samadhi means like fixed consciousness, fixed intelligence, fixed mind. And without, there's a song George Harrison wrote. It was on the last album that he released. Well, it was released after he passed away, but it was a song called "Any Road," and I think he took it from what's that? There's some Chinese text. What is it called? The I Ching or something? What is it? What is it called again? Yeah. He gleaned some wisdom of that, but he said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. So without a fixed purpose, without direction, we're basically just being dragged around by our mind and senses. And that's like the driver, the intelligence. It's like it's not holding the reins. The mind and the senses are just dragging us around like that dog that's just being dragged around by its sense. So we're dragged around by all, there's a screen everywhere. Oh, what's that? And there's music, and there's, what's that? It's that again. We're just being pulled by our senses and the mind. And it's anxiety. It's just anxiety to be out of control. And that's one of the characteristics of a cultured person, is that they have control over their mind and senses. They're not just whimsically doing things, without any focus or any direction, just saying anything that comes to their, mind, and just indulging their senses in unnecessary gratification, which ultimately just causes suffering. So it's one of the practical benefits of taking up seriously a spiritual practice, that you kind of get your mind and senses under control, and you can actually focus on a purposeful life. Without purpose, you really just can't be peaceful. Like if there's no ultimate sort of destination, it's like we're wandering aimlessly, in this material world, trying to find satisfaction and happiness in temporary situations. So Krishna, or Arjuna, submits to Krishna, says, I am confused about my purpose, my duty. I've just lost all composure due to miserly weakness. Now I'm asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I'm your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. So this is actually the sign of intelligence. It's not a weakness. to submit to a mentor. This is actually a sign of intelligence. It's a sign of strength. That part of intelligence is to recognize the limits of your intelligence. That's part of being intelligent, is to realize I can only go so far with this apparatus that I have, this body and senses and my mind and intellect. It's very limited. And just by design, material world is called kunta. It's a place of anxiety. By design, it's like, I remember when I first met devotees in 1980. I was pretty frustrated. I was a young guy. I had just turned 20 and gone through a lot of stuff. I won't go into any details at this point, but I was pretty frustrated. And I thought something was wrong with me. I thought everybody else was enjoying. Everybody else was like happy. And I'm not happy. Something's wrong with me. And when I first met the devotees, and one of the first things they told me was, the material world's a place of misery. And I'm like, what? Well, that doesn't mean we can't be happy in this world, but our happiness has to come from a different level of enjoyment, spiritual happiness. We can be happy in this world. We're not saying you can't be happy in this world, but by design, if we are chasing after ephemeral pleasure in the form of material, we say sense gratification. It's a foreign term, and we say it all the time. That's just sense gratification. It's like, what are you talking about? Sense gratification. I mean, it's like kind of it's jargon, It's unnecessarily indulging in the sensual pleasures, beyond what we need to keep body and soul together. So when Arjuna submits to Krishna, it's not the end of it. I mean, he still has doubts. Throughout the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is saying, I have a doubt. Even after he submits to his mentor, Krishna, as a disciple, he still has doubt. He's begun the process. He's initiated the process of extricating, ourselves out of the material world. When we say you take initiation from a guru, that means you're beginning the process. That's not the end. That's the beginning. Just acknowledging that I can't do this on my own. I need help. And actually, when it really comes down to it, bhakti, the process of devotional service, it's a process of reaching for grace, reaching for mercy. It's not through our effort alone. I mean, we make an effort. We make an effort to inquire, and we make an effort to practically engage ourselves. But it's not through our efforts alone. It's ultimately by grace, from blessings, from Krishna, from God, and from pure devotees of God, unalloyed devotees who have no other interest than pleasing the Lord and helping other people reestablish their relationship with God. When you meet such personalities, that's when there's that's the catalyst. That's what really. It's like when you have a kindling, and then you bring some kind of heat source to it. Like, I don't know, when you're out in the forest or whatever, you have, what is it, flint? You have to, ignite the kindling somehow. So when you meet an unalloyed devotee of the Lord, a pure devotee of the Lord, that ignites something in us. It's dormant within us. Just like fire is dormant within wood, wood through the process of photosynthesis. the sun's energy is transformed into the wood. There's a fire element. There's that sun energy has been transformed into the wood. So how do you bring out that fiery element in the wood? Is you bring it in proximity to another fiery object, and then it brings it out. It's already there. So when we come in contact with a unalloyed devotee of the Lord who has love for God, that's like bringing that fire close to the wood. Then it ignites the fire that's in the wood. So this is the whole idea of meeting representatives of God, because in our present state we don't have the purity of heart, and senses are not purified to the point where we can have direct experience of God. So very mercifully, God appears in various forms that we can access. And chief of those forms is a bona fide spiritual master, a guru. So that's the foundation of Bhagavad Gita, is when Arjuna submits to Krishna and says, please instruct me. So there are a few thoughts. How about some discussion? Anyone have anything that resonated with you? Yes, Kirtanishwar.
How do you know what is a bona fide guru?
Well, you get some, just like if you're going to buy gold or something, you need some preliminary knowledge. Otherwise, they have a thing called fool's gold. If you don't have some preliminary knowledge, so Bhagavad Gita or other Vedic literatures, they give description of who is a bona fide guru, and that's important. Get some preliminary knowledge, but the real catalyst, well, not a catalyst. What's the word? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada's spiritual master said, "Don't try to see a sadhu. What will you see? What's our measuring? What can we measure? And we can get some preliminary knowledge, but try to be seen by a sadhu." And it's not so much how do you recognize a guru, it's how do you become recognized by a guru. And that means you have to have deep sincerity, and you have to call out with deep feeling. You have to cry to God, please send me a bona fide spiritual master. And you get some preliminary knowledge from the scriptures, but because of our impure consciousness, it's difficult. So it really, Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Poi Bhakta Latabish. Because Krishna is in the heart, God is within the heart of every living entity. When he sees you're sincere, you're honest, you're free from duplicity, there's no hidden agenda, then Krishna sends a bona fide spiritual master. So it's not so much about recognizing who is a guru, it's being recognized by a guru. And you'll be recognized by a guru because Krishna is sending them to you. That's the real, it's more about us. I mean, this is something that comes up a lot where people are sort of measuring. They have like a measuring rod. They got some knowledge from the scriptures. Okay, now I'm going to examine everybody with this measuring rod and see who fits the bill, and not really thinking about what is my qualification. that's more of a concern is, am I being sincere? Am I examining my motives? Why do I want to? Is it just because I want to be cool and have a guru? Because I got some friends here, and some of them are initiated, so I want to be part of the club. I want to get a Sanskrit name. I want to be. It's like a fad. It's like, hey, what's the latest genes? It's like, hey, what's the latest thing? Yeah, get initiated by a guru, get a guru. It's like a fad, and it's an eternal commitment. Ultimately, it's the most serious relationship you can ever enter into. It goes beyond this life. That's the real guru, and we can have many mentors, but Sadguru, the eternal guru, is one who's going to take you out of this material world, holding on to their instructions, dedicating ourselves to service and inquiry. And Krishna says, Tadvidhi panipatena pariprashnena sepya. Upatekshani te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshana. Try to learn the truth by approaching a bona fide spiritual master. Render service and inquire submissively. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge because they've seen the truth. They're experienced. They have experience. Anything else? Yes. It was Cora, right?
Yes. I'm trying. We gotta go make some side
Okay.
I'm trying. Oftentimes in religious conversation or spiritual conversation, we will talk about not getting too caught up in the physical or sensory desires. And when you said that, well, my thought was, I think it's okay to work hard towards maybe a new car or a better standard of living. I think that it's very natural to want to be able to have maybe fresh clothes or shop at a different place or live in a different neighborhood. But what I think that people do is they get too caught up in thinking that's all there is to life, when rather they're blind to seeing that there is much more that is non-tangible, that is actually way more fulfilling than any sort of steak or any sort of car or any sort of house or apartment can provide.
I concur with you. Thank you. Yeah, it's natural. People want to, upgrade, move to a better neighborhood, get a nicer house. So how about upgrading to the spiritual world, where there's no birth, death, old age, and disease? I mean, that's a real upgrade. Prabhupada described, like in a prison, if you get a prison cell with a view, is that a lot better than someone who has a prison cell without a view? Yeah, relatively it's better, but you're still in prison, So improving our material circumstance, yeah, get a prison cell with a view. It's not ultimately solving our real problem. It doesn't mean it's bad to want to live a decent life and work in a way that provides a reasonable level of comfort. We're not meant to live unnecessarily in an austere way, denying ourselves, basic human needs. But if we live a simple life and we kind of minimize our necessities, then we have a lot more time and energy to cultivate spiritual life. If our mind is swimming with so many ideas and plans how to get ahead in the material world, it's hard to sit and hear spiritual knowledge and meditate and so on. So. Yes, Nick.
Krishna, thank you for another lovely talk. Very enlightening. I was just thinking about how, it made sense what you were saying about when you have sincerity, then a guru finds you, But I was also thinking that, like, you won't have like total sincerity, and that's also why you look for the guru. So I was thinking of like how this process in a way seems like a constant kind of leap of faith, or like kind of faking it till you make it, Is that so I was just thinking about that too, because like sometimes how we think like, oh, not like you were saying this, but it just made me think of this, of like, oh, I have to get to like in a way we have to get to a certain point to like get initiated, right? It's like with the standard in ISKCON, it's it's like chant 16 rounds per year and stuff like that. So, but then also it's like, it's not like we're gonna be set like in a certain type of perfection when we're, like you were saying, initiating is beginning. So I was just thinking that like with what, about to be taking initiation, and how there's a certain level you have to come to with things, but also it's like you're also never there too. And you have to know that, and like constantly be like, I'm just gonna kind of take this leap of faith. Like for me, like there's like, I guess maybe there's a part of me that's sincere, so that's why I'm probably about to take initiation. But then also, there's a part of me that's totally not sincere, but I'm still gonna like most likely be taking that leap, So I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, in the 7th chapter, Krishna says there are 4 types of pious people approach me, begin to render devotional service: the distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the absolute. And then Krishna says, of those 4, the one who is in full knowledge and engaged in pure devotional service is the best, because they're very dear to me, and I'm very and I'm very dear to them, and they're very dear to me. But then he says, but all of these are good, no matter what your motivation.
Mm-hmm.
But one who is situated in knowledge of me, Krishna says, I consider them to be like my very self, because they're not approaching the Lord for something in return. It's basically they're approaching God with a motivation of love. They want to understand God, to love God. Whereas the person who's in distress, the person who's desirous of wealth, even the person who's just inquisitive, it's like, oh yeah, I'm just curious. Oh, you satisfied my curiosity. Thanks a lot. I'm going on. So that's something to be mindful of, that when we enter into the path, that it's likely we don't have completely pure motives. And that's what the whole process is. It's to purify us to the point of unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service. And that's generally takes a lifetime. It's not something that, it's not just an intellectual acceptance of the philosophy. It's the purification of the heart. And primarily that's accomplished through hearing from Krishna directly, or hearing from Krishna's representatives. That transcendental sound vibration, the holy name, or katha, Krishna katha, talks about Krishna. In the Bhagavatam, the first canto of the Bhagavatam, it says that Krishna in the heart, the Paramatma, he cleanses the desire for material enjoyment from one who has developed an urge to hear his messages. And that sound vibration, the holy name or other katha, Krishna katha, that is direct association with Krishna. It's absolute. So we become purified of our ulterior motives that we may not even be aware of. Like when we take up the process, like we think, yeah, I really want this. But when we start to undergo the process of purification, there'll be things that will rise up in the heart, like desires that we were not even aware of. And that's where the surrender comes, where when these desires rise up, we say, no, I want God. I'm not going to chase after these other things. So yeah, it's an ongoing process of surrender. Like it's like when if you're going to take a trip somewhere, the step one is to get in the car and turn the car on. But then you have to drive. And then you have to navigate the changing terrain or the curves and this and that. So getting initiated is like you got in the car and you just turned it on. But now you have to drive. Like now you have to live a life dedicated to serving God. And that's going to involve a lot of curves and slippery roads and bumps, that's the process of purification is going to involve navigating all sorts of difficulties, and the idea of having a guru, and it's going to involve fall downs, just like a child when they're learning how to walk, they stumble, but they need something to like grab onto to stand up again. So the guru is like that. We're going to have subtle or gross fall downs, and then we need like a pillar to hold on to stand back up. And then as we mature, then we can become a pillar for somebody else to grab onto, So yeah, that was a good point, that it is a leap of faith, but it's reasonable faith. It's not blind faith. As far as my intelligence as far as I've been able to understand, this is the path I want to take. But yeah, there's things that I don't know that are going to come down the road. And I don't know 100% for sure, but I have reasonable faith because what I have been able to understand makes a lot of sense. And the people who are practicing devotional service, I can see they're developing many, many good qualities, and they're loving people, they're kind, they're compassionate, they're truthful. So it's reasonable faith. It's not just blind faith. So, whatever intelligence we have to exercise and try to understand this, the association of others who are practicing it, and then our personal experience. So yeah, there's some intellectual understanding, there's some support from other practitioners, and then our own personal experience. We get some experience. And so faith is a composite of different things. It's not just one thing. It's not just like intellectually understanding, okay, now I have faith, It requires association, it requires direct personal experience. And then that composite, that firm faith, as that's really, devotional service is really about sort of condensing and deepening our faith. It begins with Adao Shraddha, begins with some tender faith. Yeah, I'm kind of interested in this. Let me check it out. I have some faith, and then so then you come in the association of devotees, and you're checking it out, and you're like, yeah, kind of like this. I like these people. I'm getting some taste, it's like so then I think I'm going to go for it. I'm going to, I'm not going to just put my toes in the water, I'm going to jump in, so that's bhajana kriya. That's when you take a initiation and you follow the process. And then the anarthas, the unwanted things, as they rise up in the heart, and as you go through the process of hearing and chanting, and those unwanted things are cleared, then you come to a point of nishta, or steadiness, firm faith. But faith is it's a development of faith, because faith is really, you could say, the substance of any loving relationship. You have to have some faith in the other person. Otherwise, why are you going to, if you don't trust the other person, how are you going to have a meaningful relationship? So it's about developing faith in Guru and Krishna, and it's solidifying or deepening that faith, and it matures to this point of nishta, and then you start to develop real taste. When you're chanting and you're hearing and you're seeing the deity, and you're really getting a taste, and your desires for material, involvement, sense gratification becomes less and less, and it actually just drops off completely because you have so much taste. So this is the whole process of maturing. Then one becomes very attached to Krishna, and then ecstasy, bhava, and then pure love of God. So it's a science. But you made a good point that it does require. There is that element of faith, but if we understand, it's not a what's the word, unipolar. It's not a monolithic. Faith is a composite. It's a composite of different things. So we're hearing that will give us some experience and maybe stimulate our intelligence, but it has to go to the heart. You can't, there's an expression, the longest distance in the world is between the head and the heart. It can't just be, there has to be demonstrable action. In order to experience Krishna consciousness, it can't just be an intellectual acceptance. We actually have to engage our senses in acts of devotion, then we'll get experience, and then the purification when practically engaging in acts of devotion. I mean, Prabhupada really emphasized a lot that, we're not just idle meditators. Devotional service involves practically engaging your mind and senses in acts of devotion. And that's one definition of bhakti is sarvopadi vinirmuktam tatparat mema nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti uchite. Bhakti is called, it's established that when one is free from all false designations and you engage your senses in the service of the master of the senses, that's practical devotional service.
Yeah, sometimes I think about how it's like not a spectator sport.
Yeah.
Like I'll be here whether I want to participate or not. It's like I'm finding myself doing it because it's hard to just kind of sit back and, you have to be involved. But that's the fun of it. Yeah, thanks for those words. I was thinking when you were talking about the driving analogy, I was thinking of an analogy, not to have too much of a dramatic analogy, but I like adventure, like most people do. And I was thinking of it like taking a boat, like having a storm out at sea, and then being willing to take that leap of faith to get on that boat, because knowing that it'll be better than the ground that I'm on, and that I know that boat's got a good captain, like a good guru, and a favorable wind, like they say, and that there'll be better weather on the other side of that storm. So deciding on my own to go out there and knowing it'll be better on the other side. I can, have smoother sailing, even though it's willingly go to take that adventure from going from the mind to the heart, kind of like you were saying.
Yes.
So I know chanting and stuff, practicing for myself and in communities really good. But I know a lot of people that are really suffering, and I feel kind of guilty. I think that I just maybe I think I have the answer in my head, but I don't know. I still want to express the question. I feel kind of guilty that I am on this trajectory, and in my mind I've toyed with the idea of moving to a place like this and letting go of my life and stuff like that. But I don't know, it makes me feel kind of guilty because I have a lot of family members and close friends that are really genuinely suffering. And also there's just a lot of suffering in the world. And I know I'm only one human, but I feel kind of guilty just having a nice little chanting and reading and sharing with people when I have family members that are just going through hard things, and I have close friends that are like just really not okay, you know. Like, I know many people that have taken their lives. Like, it just kind of makes it. It has like a bitter taste in my mouth. You know what I mean? I don't really know what I could do in that situation other than just like, I guess, be myself and like live my life. But I don't know. I don't know what to do in that situation. Like, I feel kind of guilty if I just. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's an example of when you go on the airplane and they tell you about the safety features of the plane, and they say if there's a loss of cabin pressure, then oxygen mask will drop down. And they always say, before you try to help somebody else, first put the mask on yourself and then help other person. So, and I appreciate what you're saying. And it's a criticism actually of it has been a criticism of our tradition, that you're just withdrawing from the world and you're not really dealing with the real problems that people are going through. And it can be sort of a way that people can become impersonal. Actually, Prabhupada, in one purport I was reading in the Gita, he says in the beginning of spiritual life, there's some leaning towards impersonalism. And part of that is because of all the suffering that we experience in this world. Sometimes when you take up spiritual life, it's like, oh, I don't want to have anything to do with that anymore. That was all just suffering. But as we mature in our spiritual practice, that's all we're really worried about is the suffering of others. And we want to help people immediately with their needs, but most significantly, we want to help them solve the real problem of repeated birth and death, old age, disease. As long as we're in a material body and going through the cycle of repeated birth and death, there's going to be distress. So the ultimate welfare work we can do for others and for ourselves is to get out of the material world altogether. But that doesn't mean we don't deal with the immediate suffering that people are going through. But again, first you got to put the mask on yourself and become strong in character and in spiritual realization, so that you can actually, Prabhupada, he was reading, if a person is drowning and you rescue their clothes and you come back to the shore, with their clothes, but the person drowned, that doesn't mean we don't try to help people immediately, with their material necessities. But Mahatma Gandhi said there's enough for every man's need, but not for every man's greed. So much of the suffering in the world is because there's exploitation. There's enough food to go around, but there's wars are fought, and they starve people. They cut off supply lines, they starve people, so, and just overindulgence, there's, there are parts of the world that, they're the gross national product of one state in the United States could probably feed, a whole country, So it's so lopsided, because of this exploitation. So if we purify the heart, actually, Prabhupada, there was an article in Time magazine, Crime, Why and What to Do. It was back in the 1970s, and it was in Chicago. So it was a big article. Time magazine was very popular at the time. And it said, crime, why and what to do. So Prabhupada met with the police. It was a Lieutenant Mosey was his name. And he proposed that we need to gather people together to congregationally chant the holy names of God. This will purify people's hearts, and that will help solve the crime problem. The problem is a problem of the heart. You know, the Mother Teresa said, the real problem of the world is hunger, not hunger of the belly. It's hunger of the heart. People are dying for loving relationships. And when we don't experience real loving relationships, we try to exploit the material world, the resources of the material world, or other people. So the problem really is a problem of the heart. And unless there's some effort to purify the heart, any welfare work that we do is simply like putting a Band-Aid. You know, say you got a cancer tumor and you just put a Band-Aid over it. No, you got to go to the root of the problem, you know? So that's, you know, but that, again, that doesn't mean we don't deal with the immediate needs, but simultaneously there has to be, you have to treat the root of the problem, you know? So, yeah, so if you, you know, like with alcoholics or drug addicts or something, first you just have to stop the addiction. But then you have to, you know, once you stop the addiction, then you can go to the real problem. Why are you drinking in the first place? Why are you taking drugs? You know, if you don't change the heart, they're just going to go back to, you know, if it's not drugs, they'll, you know, get into, I don't know, video games, or, you know, they'll have some other addiction, you know. So the problem is you know, it's a question of love, you know, that people are not feeling, they're not being fulfilled in loving relationships. So therefore they're exploiting others, trying to fulfill that God-shaped hole in their heart. And therefore there's all this injustice and suffering in the world. So in addition to tending to the immediate needs of people, there has to be a serious effort to go to the root of the problem. Is that okay?
Reminds me of what it was, a Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati who said that the only lack in the world is God consciousness. You heard that?
Yeah. Yes.
Actually, it's kind of like, it's a question, but I believe it would also kind of help with his question a little bit, because I think it kind of coincides, you know, and it's just mainly the phrase. It's very simple because it's from like a television show, but the concept is very, very relative to how, depending on what you've incarnated to be as on this earth, you know. So in this show, there's this character named Netero, and Netero is a monk, you know, and he has to essentially slay this genocidal demon that is at war with humanity, and he loses, you know, the battle, but his battle motivates the true hero to come life or whatever. But he says this phrase during the fight because he loses his arms and you know, it's like, oh, how is he going to fight without his body and everything? So because he's a monk, he fights, you know, by surrendering to the greater divine consciousness that is, you know, I believe in the show it's Lord Vishnu. That's who praises to. And there's a scene he finally loses his leg and his arms, and this genocidal demon is how do you expect to, you know, you're not going to win this fight. How do you expect to defeat me, to even challenge me? This isn't even a game anymore, you know? And Netero says, he says, like, you know, you haven't realized this whole time. A prayer does not, you do not need two hands to pray. A prayer comes from your heart. A prayer comes from your heart. And so I essentially, like, I think about that a lot because, you know, I think about it's only a very short excerpt, but it's part of the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna is explaining that you incarnated in this life of a warrior. Like there are certain souls you have to incarnate as. There are different purposes based on, you know, your karmic resolve of having to go through samsara again and again. And you know, he says, yeah, the life of a warrior is hard. You know, you have to take from all aspects. You have to be a sage in your heart.
Hmm.
You know, you have to let the song of God ring through your heart. You know, if you, like you said, it's not intelligence, because that is what the warrior is. He's a master of strategy. If you try and intelligently try and cling and grasp to God, you'll find yourself coming up with the short end. You know, with it's like chasing kite strings, because the song of God is truly all that matters. Just being in it. Some people are meant to play the melody in grand design of things, and some people are just meant to be the rhythm. You know, just flow through the state of experiencing God's grace. Really.
Spoken like a true musician.
Thank you. But yeah, I don't know if that helps though. I just try to from chanting, I try and kind of connect the dots with that. You know, like it's from all these great masters and everyone here, it's intentionalizing the supreme consciousness. You know, like it is speaking the words. You know, the mantra is bringing forth great consciousness that is Krishna. You know, it's taking straight from the well. You know, so a Tibetan saying is that, you know, can't learn if your cup is full. You know, sometimes you just have to empty your cup and allow benevolence in your heart. You know, and it's crazy. It is through like the most material world thing that I end up trying to learn that. I mean, when you're in combat and everything, all you can do is surrender. What are you going to do with it? The more you dwell in ego, trying to negate your opponent, or just essentially de-escalate things, you find that all you're doing is grasping with your ego, grasping at kite strings. You have to surrender and admit to the moment, admit to this is God, this is now. And that's really all you can do.
Another thing too is that most devotees don't live in an ashram and are just chanting and reading all day. You know, most devotees are working in the world. You know, there are devotee doctors, there are devotee counselors, there are devotee policemen. I mean, there you know, being a devotee doesn't mean you are not integrated into society, the broader society. There may be a point where you take some time out just to get grounded in spiritual practices, so that you can go out and help make the world a better place and relieve suffering in a very substantial way. But you're doing it from especially from the heart, as you were saying. It's got to come from the heart. Like, there has to be compassion for the soul, not just for the body. You know, just alleviating people's bodily distress or even their mental distress is important, but it's partial. It's not really solving the problems. As long as someone is entangled in the material world, they're going to be struggling with distress. We all are, you know, from the mind or body, from the external nature, from other living beings. That's an inevitable part of being in the material world, is that there are these different difficulties, that it's like you jump into the water expecting not to get wet. No, that's the nature of the water. So the material world inherently is a place of suffering and difficulty. And until we get out of the material world, there's always going to be some type of suffering, you know. So the ultimate welfare is to help people get out of the material world. But there are devotees working in the world addressing the immediate needs that people have on a material level. Because if you're starving to death, you're not going to be, you know, thinking about God. You're just thinking about, where am I going to get my next meal? You know, if you got bombs dropped, you know, like, you know, the war is going on. If you got bombs dropping in your neighborhood, you know, you're just worried about not being killed. You know, are you really in a state of mind where you're going to be able to meditate and, think about God. No, so you have to deal with the immediate situations and try to alleviate certain material circumstances. But ultimately, again, as long as we are in the material world, we're subject to suffering, but that shows your compassionate nature, and that was Arjun's qualification. Actually, he was very compassionate. He said, why should we kill everybody? Like, I don't want the kingdom. Why should, and in the commentary, Prabhu writes, this is actually the soft-heartedness of Arjun, but it was misapplied to the body. Compassion for the soul is the mature level of compassion. So, but that doesn't, I'm repeating myself, but it doesn't mean we're callous to the material suffering, but if we understand that it is the nature of the place. That's why I was saying when I first came and met the devotees, and they said the material world is a difficult place. It's a place of suffering. And I thought, I thought I was crazy. I thought everybody else was enjoying, and I'm the only one who wasn't, happy. So that was a great relief to understand the nature, of the material world.
Thank you.
Should we shut this up? I just
Yeah.
add on, but I don't know how to say it. Oh, Gurudev said something.
Oh.
I was just it's kind of a tangent, but I thought maybe it was worth mentioning.
It's not for class, that's her private message.
Yeah. Just on the topic of suffering, you were mentioning how we're more receptive is an advantage of it. So I was thinking it's kind of, even though we want to do our best to have a healthy lifestyle, so, because our goal isn't to suffer, but I was just thinking that it's cool how, Krishna consciousness gives us a good perspective on everything, even suffering. That, with that, like we hear about in these stories, how devotees have some of their deepest moments and connections with Krishna, so that we can actually have a meaningful experience within suffering, even though we're not trying to, but how it's like just shows a good spin on everything, even suffering, I just sort of thinking about that.
Good point. All right, should we wrap it up?
Yeah, take it.
All right, thank you very much.
Mantri, Prabhu. How do you end this on YouTube?
I have no idea.
It's a whole new YouTube world.
Someone needs to read that.
Looks fancy.
Oh, no.